Hello, I am Kelvin Zarang, and this is.
Michael's ring.
And you are the CEO slash owner of.
Custom Logic Design.
What do you
I
do?
I um, I create and maintain software for public safety agencies. That would be police departments and fire departments.
Cool. How long have you been doing that?
This will be 26 years.
That is older than I am.
Yes, I've been doing it a long time. Custom Logic Design's been around a bit longer than that. Um, the founder retired not quite a decade ago now.
um, what would you say are the biggest strengths of your company right now?
Um, Biggest strengths of the company right now are a uh, our strong uh, customer relationship. I currently have two major clients, and I deal with several people at each of those clients very closely. I try to be as responsive as humanly possible. When you deal with public safety agencies, of course, they have a 24/7, 365 mentality. Um, I would say much more so than even corporate customers who might think they do. But when you are involved in responding to heart attacks or uh, standoffs, you, you want things working at all times. Um, so you have to be extremely responsive, which I feel that we are. Um, the uh, the ability to handle anything that needs to be done from our end quickly and efficiently is very important. We're very small, extremely small.
I believe it's only one employee, right?
Yes, yes. So I personally wear a lot of hats. However, there's never any uh, any need to punt things around internally to find out who knows what or who can do what, and that can be quite helpful when responding to situations. At any given time, whenever somebody's asking a question, I know what can and can't be done, and what it would take to accomplish something. And so customers can take what I say very strongly. There's no doubt when I say something.
What would you say are some lessons you've learned from your 26 years of doing this?
Um, what are some of the lessons that I've learned in my 26 years? Um, well, I mean, tongue in cheek, you can always count on bad things happening whenever you're least available. Of course, I'm always on call. I will always answer customer questions or concerns anytime any time of day, any day of the year. Um, However, of course, like everybody else, occasionally you do want to do things like go on vacation. So, um, and it just seems that whenever you do that, you're much more likely to have some sort of uh, issue crop up that would have been unexpected, and you usually have to learn to roll with it. Um, of course, I also sell to cities and counties. Um, so flexibility in the procurement process and the bidding process and things of that sort has been an important lesson as well. It's very different than trying to um, say sell software through an app store or producing widgets that you hand off to distributors who get them to stores who get them into customers. It's dealing with your customers very directly, and in a very strictly organized process, which is a unique facet of this sort of business compared to other sorts of businesses.
All right, let's move on to how, when you're negotiating contracts with cities and entities, do you feel like they have a lot more power over you, and how many like competitors are you typically bidding against when you do stuff like that?
Well, you see that's part of the process, of course. Local governments are required to go through a bidding process um, when dealing with things over a certain size, and obviously we're interested in things of that sort. When you've got uh, three major stages when you're dealing with a customer. You've got the initial acquisition, which any business will tell you is the most difficult. Then you have any sorts of additional projects that might erupt from that, and in my case, I deal with a lot of annual maintenance. So the biggest area when dealing with trying to land a customer for the first time is they're going to have a bid process. So what they're going to do is they're going to um, produce a document that outlines what they're looking for. It's a specification to a large extent, and they're going to put that out for some amount of time for anybody to read that and prepare a response, and then they're going to have their internal matrices of trying to evaluate the responses to that, and typically they're required to choose the low bid. Of course, they have flexibility in deciding whether or not any given bid actually meets their criteria and things of that sort. And so, in terms of bargaining power, because you're going through a bid process, if you're trying to get a new customer, when you're going through that, the process is less of an initial negotiation from your point of view as it is an auction or bid process. And that structure is meant to minimize opportunities for corruption. Is supposed to maximize the value received by the agency. It's supposed to guide their decision-making process in a documented and public or semi-public manner, and so that process at the same time does try to shift the bargaining power towards the buyers, which again makes sense because you're looking at it, something that's being set up and constrained by the government, and most people would want their government to get good deals on stuff, even if they're trying to sell to them where you would like to make money. So in that sense, the process is meant to try to mitigate any sort of leverage that suppliers might have. Now, having said that, of course, I provide software. Once you've sold software to a customer, at that point, then some of the bargaining power tends to move slightly more towards me or other suppliers, for the simple reason that you have software, if it's working for you and it's deployed and all your people are trained on it, um, moving away from that is complicated.
There's a lot of costs involved in that.
Yeah, direct and indirect costs. And of course, selling the initial licenses, at least as how I do things, is significantly more expensive than any sort of um, maintenance or support, which would happen regularly, and oftentimes that has an approval process through uh, the city or county government as well, but that oftentimes doesn't need to go through a bidding process because um, there's not really anybody else who is in a position to offer maintenance for my software. Um, Obviously, if you look at things that are significantly more off the shelf or things of a different scale, for instance, somebody might have licenses for Windows or for SQL Server, but they might contract out for most maintenance or things of that sort, not directly with, say, Microsoft, because that's not really necessary. Um, but for something of my scale, there's nobody else who could or would provide support for my specific software. That wouldn't be economical. They wouldn't have the expertise, and they wouldn't have the ability to make minor bug fixes, which obviously I can do. In addition, obviously, if you're looking for significant feature enhancements and things of that sort that might warrant a one-off project or things of that sort, again, there's only myself that can provide those sort of upgrades to my software. Although Custom Mod Design has traditionally and is still very willing and able to license our source code to our customers, and they would be welcome to pay for such a license and then do either support or upgrades themselves. And while we have had people take advantage of having some access to source code, and upon occasionally done some minor upgrades themselves, for the most part, that's not been a major factor for us. Although having that as an option is useful, particularly for somebody in my position where I'm a much smaller competitor, and having the ability to say you could get this source code and you could do your own things with it helps mitigate some of the fear or risk that a client might have.
How worried are you about new technologies such as like AI impacting the government, maybe trying to do some of the stuff internally instead of contracting out to third-party customers?
I'm not particularly concerned about that in any sort of near or medium term. I my personal experience with cities and counties has been that they are reasonably risk adverse. They have budget constraints and things of that sort, and I don't think that most of them have the personnel to attempt to do that sort of thing themselves. I think that if you look back in the history of this sort of software, there was more internal development of these sorts of things 30 to 40 years ago now, but that hasn't been
The case since the internet came into existence?
for a long time. for a long time, and I think you see that not just in the public sector, but in the private sector as well, um, where there may be more of a switch to that sort of thing. Um, but I think you're more likely to see that in things that represent much smaller bits and pieces of what some sort of organization is going to be doing, and not in something that is, at least not for a long time, something that's more critical to them. So if um, yeah, as some of the ads I've seen online show, if somebody in a medium-sized business develops their own budgeting dashboard for their sub-department in their organization through AI type tools, then great. But I don't think you're going to be seeing it anytime soon. A company having people use AI to develop um, their primary workflow inside the business. I think that's a different animal. And while I wouldn't say I'm the primary work piece of any of the police or fire departments. I address something that's in the middle of their primary workflow, which is getting people and vehicles where they need to be in response to events. That's kind of a major thing for a fire department or for a police department. You got to get the ambulance where the person's having a heart attack. That's kind of a big deal. Whereas something that helps, track inventory of some things, maybe something like that would happen, but it would be some substantial amount of time um, before I would even think that would be attempted, let alone seriously concerned about it.
From my personal experience, cities and governments typically tend to be the last to adopt new technologies and whatnot. So even if other companies and stuff do that, I would be shocked if they did it quickly.
Well, I don't know if you can necessarily say that. I think in a lot of cases, governments have helped spur certain sort of technological innovations, but here one of the concerns that I would have, or anybody else in my industry would have, is of course you've got municipal budgets, you have budgetary constraints, things of that sort. This industry isn't a huge growth industry. Nobody's looking at this and licking their chops thinking that they're going to make $100 billion IPO out of it or anything of that sort, which is fine for somebody at my scale. I'm perfectly fine. I'm not looking to do that, but larger companies would probably be more concerned about the fact that the industry is not likely to see huge growth. There are a lot of police and fire departments across the United States and worldwide, but it's not like there are new ones sprouting up every day.
Yeah.
And once you've sold your software to a particular agency, they're going to hold on to that for some extended period of time. And if things go well for you, you will keep that customer for a while. You will do support with them for a long time. But again, it's not the same thing as Amazon or Tesla or anything of that sort. So to some extent, of course, that helps mitigate the attraction to entries into the market. but at the same time, negates the benefit that you could acquire from entering into the market too, so or staying in the market.
How would you say is the rivalry among the firms who do this sort of government software contracts?
Obviously, companies like to get as much of a pie as they possibly can. However, part of the job is integrating and working with other vendors. So, part of your ability to get and maintain these sort of customers is your ability to work with other vendors that they have or might have in the future. Of course, because there is limited ability to grow horizontally, there is some pressure to grow vertically, which can create squeeze between companies. So you've got different pieces of software that a city or a county might use in my general area of what I do. They're public safety specific type pieces of software. So you've got things like record systems where these agencies are needing to keep detailed records about all sorts of things that police departments and fire departments do. You've got dispatching software. As I alluded to earlier, getting apparatus and personnel to where they need to be in response to various events is a very core piece of software for these sorts of agencies. You would also have software in their cars and trucks and ambulances and things of that sort that would communicate with the dispatching software. You might have even more specialized bits of reporting type software running on those computers as well. And obviously, any time you have those different pieces, they might want to talk to each other. So you obviously provide more value the more those bits of software talk to each other. So there is an incentive to be able to provide the whole stack, and the ability to do that, of course, does provide more competition between different players in the market. For instance, I provide in-vehicle software that handles the apparatus side of being dispatched and keeping your status up to date and being able to search up bits of information, things of that sort. That could be indicating that you're transporting somebody to this hospital. It could be checking to see if the car in front of you is stolen, things like that. There are some pieces that I also provide that stand in between a computer-aided dispatching system and that in-vehicle client application. So obviously, my most direct competitors would be people providing other sorts of in-vehicle client application software. However, perhaps a bigger concern would be CAD vendors eating that section of the market themselves, which of course makes sense if you're providing a computer-aided dispatching solution. You probably also have software that can run in a police car or a fire truck that can communicate with it.
Is there anything you are doing to minimize future threats to your company right now?
Minimize future threats. My modus operandi has been for a long time to provide the best and most responsive support that I can to my customers. And by keeping a good positive relationship with them and being responsive to any requests or needs that they may have, that in my experience has provided the least incentive for them to look elsewhere for a different solution. Basically, customer retention being a primary goal. That's what I'm doing most to minimize future risk. Again, going out to bid for a whole new setup for something is an expensive and time-consuming process. If your needs are being met, and they're being met well at a reasonable price, then you have little need to go through that process.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. That concludes our interview. Anything else you want to say?
Not offhand, Kelvin. Is that covered enough information for you to be able to do a industry analysis?
I'd say so. I mean, we got 25 minutes worth of content to analyze.
Okay. Well, if you need extra information, feel free to contact me and I will answer more questions.